If you're a beginner dev and would like to practice your JavaScript skills, we're building a game with Doodle Jump, this is the place for you. This video is perfect for those who have learned a bit of JavaScript but really want to practice their knowledge with some projects. So Doodle Jump is what we're going to be building. We're going to be doing this in JavaScript, HTML and CSS with very little focus on styling, okay? This is on purpose. This is because I want to get the logic of the game done so you can take the game, style it up, make it your own, add your extra flair and go wild and make it your own. Right, so once again, this is the final project. It's going to be very JavaScript focused and we're going to leave the styling up to you. So what are we waiting for? Let's do it. So I'm just starting off in WebStorm, which is my code editor of choice, but you can use whatever code editor you wish. I'm going to go ahead and create a new project and I'm going to call this JS Doodle Jump. Okay, so I'm creating this project, this folder in a directory or folder on my computer called WebStorm projects. And I'm just going to click create. So there is the folder. I'm just going to go ahead and create an HTML file. So there we go. We use the .html extension to let our code editors know to treat this as an HTML file. And it's come up with some boilerplate for me. Now, this is the head in which we store the metadata, such as the title that will show up in our tabs, essentially. So I'm going to go ahead and call this Doodle Jump. And we're going to put all our visible elements in here. Okay, so one element, second element in the HTML element. Great. And if we open this up, so in WebStorm, I can just click here and it will open this up in a internet tab for me, just like so. Once again, you will see Doodle Jump showing up here. Or if you're not using WebStorm, you can just open up the file, right? So you copy the path, copy the absolute path and paste it in your browser and it will just show that index HTML file we just made that lives in the project called JS Doodle Jump that lives in WebStorm projects on my computer. So there we go. And I'm just going to go ahead and inspect this page so we can see what's going on under the hood. Great. So I'm just going to minimize that and let's get going. I'm also, while we are here, going to link up my style sheet, which we are yet to make. Let's call it styles CSS. And in the body, well, I'm actually just going to create one div. I'm going to give it the class name of grid because I want to style this up as a grid. I'm also going to inject other elements in here using JavaScript. Okay, so we're going to literally inject them in here. So it would just be me like typing them out, you know, like creating a div and so on. But we're going to be doing that in JavaScript. Okay, that's why I'm going to get rid of that and carry on. So in here, let's go ahead and create our style sheet, right? So new style sheet, we've called it styles CSS. I'm just going to do the same here, styles CSS. And I'm going to put it in the same location as my index HTML. So there's not much we need to do here. Just make sure that this is typed the same way as this and that this is in the same location as the index HTML file. Otherwise, if this was in a folder, we'd have to like go into that folder and so on, but we're not going to do that. Great. This is looking good. Now, I'm also going to actually create an index.js file. So let's go ahead and create a file, index.js. We're adding the JS extension to allow code editors know to treat this as a JavaScript file. Now, we're going to actually wait for the DOM content to load. By DOM content, I literally just mean this in order to then start or run our JavaScript, essentially. So in order to do that, I would use document. So I'm getting the whole document, I'm getting this whole document, right? Just this whole HTML document right here. And I'm going to use the method of add event listener. And I'm going to listen out for an event. And that event is DOM content loaded. Okay, so we're waiting for that to load. And once that has loaded, we're going to run this function. I'm actually writing this function like so. So that is a function, and we want this to run, this function to get called once the content has loaded. And we're essentially going to write all our JavaScript logic in between these two curly braces right here. Cool. So that's what we're going to do. However, while we are here, I'm just going to do one thing. I'm going to actually style this grid to look somewhat like a grid. And for that, we need to do that in our CSS file. So we're going to look in here for something, for an element with the class name of grid. So dot means class name. I'm going to pick out the element with the class name of grid, and we're just going to make it look like a grid, right? I'm going to give it a width of 400 pixels, let's say. Let's give it a height of 600 pixels. So just like so. I'm also going to give it a background. I'm going to give it a background image actually. So here's background image, which takes a URL. And I'm just going to actually place in an image, right? So I think let's do that now actually. Once again, I'm going to make this super basic. I just drag it in here. If you want to like reshift it, whatever, you are more than welcome to when you're tidying this up and kind of making this your own. But I'm just going to drag it in here to make this a really easy tutorial for you. Okay, so I'm just dragged in an image. There it is. It's called background PNG and it looks like this. You can take it from my code below. I can share it with you. So now we need to write the path to this image. So all I'm going to do, again, because it's in the same place as my style sheet, there's not much we need to do. We can just grab background PNG like so. Okay? And at the moment, if I refresh this, that is what it looks like. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit so you can see the whole thing. Now, as I think we're going to have text in here, I'm also going to position things in that grid. I'm going to assign the position of relative to it so that we can position things in there. I'm also going to add a font size. I'm going to make it 100 pixels and I'm just going to align it to the center. So text align center as well. Wonderful. Okay, so that's all we have done. Now let's get to writing some JavaScript. While we are here, however, I'm actually also going to drag in two other images that we are going to need. One is of the actual Doodle guy himself. So just drag that in like so. This is what he looks like. Again, you can take it from my code. And the third one is of the platform. So once again, I've just named this platform.png. And if I click on it, it looks like this. Of course, it's a bit stretched out. It's not going to be this big. Great. So wonderful. 3 images and 3 files. We are ready to go. So let's get up our JavaScript. I'm just going to minimize that and let's continue. I think the first thing we should do is pick stuff out. So I'm going to pick out the grid. So once again, I'm going to use document. I'm going to use query selector and yes, look for an element with the class name of grid. So dot for class name. So we can pick out this whole element that we saw and use it in our JavaScript. Okay, I'm also going to create the Doodler now, and to do that, I'm going to essentially create a div. So const Doodler, just like so, and I'm going to use document, this time create element, and I'm going to create a div. So at the moment, the Doodler is a div. We haven't done anything with it at the moment. It's kind of floating around and nowhere, right? It's not going to be, if you save this file, press Command S, it's not like it's going to be in here, right? Because at the moment, there's still only the div of the class of grid in here. We haven't put in the Doodler or anything like that, or technically a div. So just keep that in mind, okay, if you're getting confused. We're also going to start over with is game over is false. And we will be changing that later on, which is why I used the let this time, because we want to override this to be true at some points. Great. So I think the first thing to do, let's actually create that Doodler, right? So I'm going to write a function for this. I'm going to call it create Doodler, just like so. And I'm going to grab the grid that we just picked out, and I'm going to use the method. So there's JavaScript method, okay, that comes with JavaScript. And I'm just going to pass in the Doodler. Okay, so I've just passed in essentially a div. But if I call this function, I'm just going to call it down here, this will get called. But we aren't quite ready yet. Okay, we're listening out to this, but we haven't actually linked this index.js file to anything yet. So back in here, we're just going to add a script tag. So I'm going to add the script tag here as well, script, just like so. The source of this is going to be index.js. Okay, and now that's officially linked. You might see the script tag being, running after all the divs have loaded. You can do it that way too. This way is a little bit more, I guess, safe, especially when, there's so much being added by JavaScript. But it's totally up to you. Whichever way you want to run the script is up to you. Okay, so once again, if you choose to put the script below all the divs, so after all the divs have loaded, then you actually don't need this DOM content loaded and event listener. That is just some knowledge for you. Great. Okay, so let's continue. So now we should be able to call this function, and it just means that if I refresh, you will see that indeed that div has been added. However, it's just a div, right? Because, that's what we said. We created a div, we put it in here. I think next, let's, create a class of Doodler so we can add it. So I'm just going to go into styles, and I'm going to do just that. So my Doodler class, I'm going to create a class of Doodler, and I'm just going to make it the exact same as essentially my PNG image. And I already have the dimensions for this, so I'm going to give it a width of 87 pixels and a height of 85 pixels. And then the background image is going to be, you need to spell it exactly the same as in here, so it's Doodler guy, just like so. Okay, and then we're also going to give it a position of absolute, as we're going to want to move around the Doodler based on the grid, so in the grid. Great. So now I can add that class. I'm going to get that Doodler after it's been added to the board. You could have done it before, and I'm going to use classless add Doodler. And if you save that and refresh, there he is. Okay, so that div suddenly has the class of Doodler, and we've applied all that styling to it. Wonderful. We will also be positioning in the grid, but we're going to be doing that in JavaScript a little bit later on. I'm also just going to, while we are here, do the same for the class of platform. Okay, so once again, this platform, we're going to give it a height and a width. So this, again, is just taken from exactly how big the image is. The height of this is going to be 15 pixels. The background image is going to be the platform.png, so that is right. And again, we're just going to give it a position of absolute. So that's now ready and done, and we can use it in a bit. Okay, wonderful. So now back to the Doodler. Well, the Doodler, what I'm going to do is essentially save a Doodler left space and a Doodler right space, but I'm going to make it global as we're going to want to change it. So I'm also going to use let. And we're going to do let Doodler left space. And let's just start off with it being 50 for now, and let Doodler bottom space. We're always going to want it to appear somewhere here. This will change as the Doodler moves up and down. We'll just keep overriding it. But as a starting state, 150 is good. Okay, wonderful. So this is good. I can use Doodler style bottom in order to position it from the bottom. So I can use Doodler bottom space, which is 150, and add the string of pixels. And that just means our Doodler will show up here. Okay, so we've added the style of bottom 150 pixels to it in order to appear 150 pixels from the bottom. So that's good. Our left positioning will be more dependent on when the first platform is, okay? And we want to randomly generate 5 platforms, randomly generate the left spacing. The bottom spacing between each of the 5 will always be constant, and we're going to use the height in order to calculate that gap. So let's get to doing it. In order to create those platforms, I am going to use a class and a constructor as a template so we can keep creating these platforms, and all we need to do is just put in that bottom height. So I'm going to show you how to use classes in order to do this. So class platform is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to use a constructor, and I'm just going to pass through the new plat bottom, which we are yet to write. Okay, and each of these classes is going to have a left, and the left is going to be random. So I'm going to use math random, which is going to actually bring back a number from 0 to just under 1. So that's what that will bring back. And I'm also going to multiply by 315. Okay, so that will bring back a random number from 0 to just under 315. And I'm doing this because the width of the actual grid is 400, and the width of the platform was 85, and 400 minus 85 is 315, right? So we just want the platform to move essentially in a position that doesn't go outside of the grid, which is why I did that math. Wonderful. Now this bottom, well, it's just going to be the new platform bottom that we passed in, and this visual. So we're going to also attach the div to this, just so it's really easy for us to see exactly which one we are talking about. And for this, I'm going to use document create element and just create a div. Now let's style this. I think it's easier to just assign this to a const and then grab that const and use class list add. And we're going to add that platform class that we just made. And then we're going to grab that visual and use style left, this left, so whatever random number came back, and pixels, and grab that visual again and use style bottom, this bottom, which is the new platform bottom, and the pixels. Okay, and then we're going to grab the grid and we're going to append child visual in order to put that in the grid that we picked out, kind of like we did previously, or exactly like we did previously with the Doodler. Okay, so that's what's going to happen when we use the class of platform. Now let's get to using it. I'm going to write a function called create platforms, multiple. And we're going to create 5, so I'm going to use a for loop for let I equals this. I want to create 5, but maybe let's actually save that up here. I'm going to save it as platform count. And we can do this as a let if we feel this is, going to change. So let platform count equal 5. And I'm just going to now use that in here. Okay, so that should loop over 5 times. And what do we want to happen 5 times? Well, let's actually calculate the platform gap. Like I said, I want to use the height of the grid. We know it's 600 pixels. And we're just going to divide it by the platform count. So this will actually come back with 120, but I'm just using math in order to get that platform gap so that we can space out each platform equally. Now that we have that platform gap, I'm going to essentially define a new platform bottom. Because I don't want them to start all the way here, I'm going to add 100 to it. So I'm going to do 100 plus, and then I'm going to use the platform gap, which is 120, right? But if I multiply it by I, so maybe let's do I multiply by platform gap. The first one will be 0, so 100 plus 0 will be the new platform bottom. So essentially our first platform will show up here at the 100 mark every single time. And then the next time we loop, it will be I will be 1, so 1 times platform gap. So it will be 120 plus 100, and that will be the next new platform bottom position for that platform. So hopefully that makes sense. Now let's get that platform class and pass through that new platform bottom. And I'm just going to define this as a new platform so that we can essentially collect them. So I'm going to actually collect them up here as well in a array so that we can see it. It's going to be an empty array, let platforms, and we're going to push these into here. So push new platform each time. So by the end of this loop, I should have 5 in there, okay, with a bunch of different attributes thanks to the constructor. So great. I'm just going to console log these out so we can see console log platforms, so the array of platforms, and I'm just going to call this for now. Okay, so I'm going to call it here, and if we now refresh, amazing. So the first time it loops, it essentially adds a platform. Second time we have 2, and so on until we have 5 of them, okay, all randomly generating from the left, but you will see the gap is equidistant each time, okay? And if we look in here, each object looks like this. So we have an object, it has a bottom, which we said was going to be 100 the first time. This one should be 220, right? Because 100 plus 120, and so on. The left is random, and it should always be from 0 to just under 315. From here to here, never going past, because then that platform will be off the grid, right? Because we are taking the width of the platform into account. 315 plus the platform will give us the full width of that grid. And we also have the visual here, so we can actually see that div. Amazing. So we know exactly which div we are working with. Great. So this is looking fun. I think let's continue. I think let's work on actually positioning the doodler so it shows up above the first platform each time, wherever it is, just a little bit above it so they can drop down onto it. So for that, we need to go into our array and get the first object's left value and assign it to the doodler. So let's do it. I'm just going to do it down here. What I'm going to do is get the doodler style left. Now we don't want the left space because that will give us 50 as we saved here as a start state. We want to override that platform left space. So let's do that up here. The platform left space. And this is good because we're saving that left space globally each time. We're going to go into platforms. I'm going to get the first item and get its left value. Okay, and now this becomes whatever the platform left value is. We've overridden it from 50 and then we assign it to doodler style left. And we're keeping track of this value globally as well, which is good. Great. So now the doodler should show up above that platform each time. Wonderful. Let's work on actually moving all the platforms next. So let's do it. I'm going to write another function. Let's get rid of this. I'm going to call it function move platforms this time. So move platforms, just like so. Making sure to spell function correctly. Great. Now, only if the doodler bottom space is above 200, let's say. So if he is above 200, we want to continue moving the platforms. Okay? So when he's up here, the platforms will move. So let's get the platforms. And for each of the platform that lives inside that array, I'm going to change the platform bottom. So let's get the platform dot bottom. And I'm just going to get the current value of it and -4 to it. Okay, so that will do that. That arithmetic operator will get the current value and just -4 from it. Next, we actually need to update that so we can see it. So I'm going to get the visual, so the platform visual, and assign it to visual so that we can now use visual style bottom and get the platform, new platform bottom that we just changed, and then we add the string of pixels. Okay, so now I'm just going to put this in a set interval and pass through move platforms so that essentially this happens every 30 milliseconds. Okay, but of course we need to do this after the platforms are created. So I'm going to do that here. In fact, let's actually write a whole new function. I'm going to write function start. And when we call this, a bunch of stuff happens if the game is not over. So at the moment, it's not if game is not over. So game over is false. We can create the platforms and then we move the platforms. Okay? So that will just help us keep our code kind of more in order. I'm going to put this at the end as well. So down here, and also stick the create doodler function in there. Great. So now if we refresh, ta-da, so you will see all of these kind of falling down. There's a bunch more stuff that we need to do, so let's continue. So let's go back here where we move the platforms. Okay, so now if the platform bottom, so for each platform, right, we're checking if it is essentially suddenly smaller than 10. Okay, because we kind of want it to disappear, not when it gets to here, but a little bit above. We're going to, well, first off, I'm just going to define first platform, and we're going to go into the platforms, get the first item and get it visual, right? So that div, and now I'm going to remove it. So I'm going to get that first platform. I'm going to first remove the class, so class list remove platform, and then I'm going to also remove it from the platforms array. So platforms shift so that it removes the first one. Okay, great. I'm just going to console log platforms here now instead. So console log platforms, and get rid of it being console logged out here. So we can see the first one being removed as soon as it gets to close to the bottom essentially. What we're also going to do is increase the score, right? Because if we go over one platform, we increase the score. So I'm going to put let score equals 0 so we can kind of keep tabs on it globally. And then we also need to create a new platform. So once again, this is the perfect scenario. So let new platform, we're going to use new platform. So the constructor, and as the new platform bottom, well, we want it to be like at the top, right? So I'm just going to pass through the height of the grid, which is 600. And let's push it into the array. So once again, platforms push, new platform. So great, we should see it deleting that platform, and then we should see it being added here. So maybe let's do 1 here, and then let's do 2 so we can see what's going on, and let's have a look. So great, you will see it's removing the platform each time and then adding a new one. Remove, so there's 4, adding a new one each time, and it appears here, right? And then it deletes as soon as it gets close to the bottom. So this is looking wonderful. We are moving all the platforms. Let's continue. I'm happy with that. I think it's now time to allow our Doodler to fall essentially. So I'm going to write a function called fall, and this is now for our Doodler because we are done with the platforms. Now, globally here, I'm going to save is jumping, as we need to know essentially if our Doodler is currently jumping, and I'm going to put as true. So we're going to start off with it being true. Let's also globally check if it is going left. So is going left, and we'll put false. Let is going right, also false. Which we can override. And then we're going to also need some timer IDs. So let left timer ID, let right timer ID. We won't give those values. And we're also going to do it for up and down. So up timer ID, let down timer ID. Another thing we're going to have to do is actually define gravity. So const gravity equals, and I'm going to do 0.9, as well as the speed, right? So let speed equals 3. Great. So that is all the variables that we're going to need. Let's move on. So when the Doodler is jumping, we're going to override is jumping to be false from whatever it is, right? Because we are not jumping, we're falling. We're also going to clear any intervals that might be running. The one that we're going to clear actually is just up timer ID, right? Because we are not going up anymore, we're falling. And we are also going to override the down timer ID. Okay, and we're going to use set interval here to run something over and over again until we clear this. And what we're going to run over and over again is the Doodler bottom space. And we're going to get whatever the current Doodler bottom space is and -5 from it. Okay, so that it's falling, right? We're decreasing the Doodler bottom space. Great. So now let's actually visually show that, right? Because it's no use to us at the moment. We need to get the Doodler style bottom and assign the new Doodler bottom space. Okay? And now if the Doodler bottom space hits less than or equal to 0, right? So it gets to the bottom of the grid, well then we need to stop this from running. So we need to clear that down timer from running, or maybe let's just define this in a function of its own. We've defined start, so let's define game over, right? Because the game will also be over if he hits the bottom. So in here, I'm going to do clear interval down timer ID. Okay, great. Let's also actually change is game over to be true, as it will be. And we don't want to do a bunch of stuff. We basically want to make sure that a bunch of stuff isn't running if game over is true, such as, starting the game. Great. I think one other thing that's cool to do is actually remove everything from the grid. And to do this, you can use while. So while grid has any first child, we can run this over and over and we get the grid and we remove child. and then we remove the grid's first child. So the first child will remove, and we'll keep doing it until there's no first child, right? So there's no childs left. So that is a cool loop to do if you want to get rid of everything in an element. Cool. And the other thing I'm going to do is the grid instead. It's going to remove everything completely. And after everything's removed, I'm going to get the grid, and in its inner HTML, I'm just going to put some text, which is going to be the final score. Cool. So that is what we are going to do for the game over. And when do we call the game over? Well, if the doodler hits the bottom. Cool. So that is the function of fall. I'm just going to call it now so you can see what is going on. Okay, so there we go. He fell really fast. Whoosh. And as you will see, everything gets removed, but essentially gets rid of everything and sticks in the score as well. So that is looking really cool. I'm happy with that. Okay, so that is fall. I'm just going to comment that out for now. And let's also write our function to jump. So function jump, just like so, and let's get to it. So just like we did with fall, I'm going to clear interval. So stop the down timer running if we jump, right? Because we're going to be going up. So we need to start the up timer running as well. Before that, I'm just going to set is jumping to true though. And let's override our up timer ID. And like I said, let's get it going. So this time I'm going to get the Doodler bottom space and plus 20 to it instead. Okay, so we minus before, now I'm adding, and of course we need to see it visually. So I'm going to do Doodler style bottom, add that new Doodler bottom space, and let's hook it up. I want this to run every 30 milliseconds. So I've just put in that. And for the fall, actually, we didn't define it. I also want this to run every, let's go with 20 milliseconds as well. Cool. So that is looking good. Let's go back to the jump. So I'm just going to call this function for now. I'm going to do it in the start. So right here. And great, he goes off, right? We actually want to stop him maybe somewhere like around here. So we need to essentially get its starting point. So up here, I'm going to do let start point equal 150. And then whatever the start point is, I'm going to assign to the first ever state of Doodler bottom space. So we can have this kind of globally and use it. This will be constantly changing, but we always know what the start point is. And now if we go back to the jump function, we can say that if suddenly the Doodler bottom space is larger than the start point, so 150, let's say plus 200, right? Then we want to fall again. And is jumping goes back to false. Okay, so let's see what happens now. Ta-da! Great. Okay, he goes up and then false. Wonderful. This is looking good. Let's continue. Now I'm just going to write some functions to move left and right. So function, let's start with move left, just like so. And if is going currently right, we need to make a few things happen. We need to clear the interval for him going right, so any kind of timing event happening with that. And we need to also change is going right to false. So if we want to move left and we make the move left function happen, we cancel everything to do with going right, and we change is going left to be true. Now we can start the left timer ID, and we want this to run every 20 milliseconds. Now, if Doodler left space is larger than or equal to 0, we can essentially go left. I'm just going to console log going left so you can see what's going on. And I'm going to get the Doodler space left, and yes, -5 from it. And we just want to show that visually, so we're going to get the actual style left and assign the new Doodler left space and the string of pixels. Okay. However, if this is not true and the Doodler left space is not over 0, then we should move right by default. Okay, so I'm just going to call that. Great. And now let's define it. So function move right this time. And essentially, just like we did before, if we press we want to move right and is going left is currently true, well, then we need to essentially get rid of everything assigned to left. So we're going to clear interval left time ID, and is going left is going to be false. And once that's done, we can continue going right. So is going right is then true. And we can get the right time ID and use set interval. Let's make this again, maybe run every 20 milliseconds. And let's just check the doodler left space. And this time, if it's larger or equal to 313, so again, taking into account the width of the grid, but also the width of the doodler. And if it is less than this, I'm just going to console log going right. And then, yes, we get the doodler left space. And this time we add 5, thank you, tab 9. And then we show it visually by getting the doodler style left and just showing the new doodler left space positioning. Okay, else we move left. So I know that was a lot. I can't really show you this until we actually hook it up to our key code. So I'm going to write function control. I'm going to pass through an event, and we're going to listen out for key presses. So every time we press a key, I just want the doodler style bottom to be updated each time, just so we get the freshest showing up on the doodler. And if the event key that we press equals arrow, let's go with left, then we want to move left. Or let's do else if, because we don't want two things happening. If arrow right, we want to move right. And let's check it out. So this control, once again, I'm going to add to the start function. I'm going to use document add event listener, key up, and then call the control function in order to essentially allow us to listen out for key presses on the game. So now I can move left and right, and you will see that updating, right? So left, right, and you will see he's always kind of staying in the grid. So this is looking cool. We can move left and right. Of course, we are still falling, but this is looking good. Of course, we also need to terminate this once the game ends, but we can do that again on the game over function. Let's clear interval up timer ID. Let's clear interval left timer ID. So I'm just clearing everything from running, and clear interval right timer ID. Okay, and that should stop that running. Let's continue. Now we just need to write what happens when we essentially collide with a platform. I'm going to do that in the for function. So just in here. Okay, so if doodler bottom space hits 0, it's a game over. So just after here. So again, if we are falling, I'm going to get the platforms, get each platform, and essentially check that there is a collision. And in order to do this, we're going to use the doodler bottom space. So I'm going to use the doodler bottom space and check that it is larger or equal to the platform bottom. So that is correct. Another thing we're going to check in order to get a collision and get the doodler to jump is that the doodler bottom space is larger or equal to, again, the platform bottom, but plus 15 this time. Okay, so essentially what we're saying is if the doodler is in like anywhere in the top and bottom of the platform, that counts as a collision. Also, what counts as a collision, it has to be true, is that it's on either side, left and right of the platform. So yes, indeed, we're going to check that the doodler left space plus 60, so we're taking that into account, is larger than or equal to the platform left, and that the doodler left space in general is smaller than or equal to platform left plus 85. Okay, so if all of those things are true, we know it's in the vicinity of the platform, and we also have to check that it's not currently jumping. If all of those things are true, well then we know that we want it to jump. So I'm actually going to get the Doodler bottom space and reassign it to the start point. So the start point is going to change now, and then we're going to jump from that new start point. Okay, so I'm going to console log this start point so you can see start point, and then we're going to put is jumping to be true. Okay, so let's see what happens. Okay, so as you will see, the Doodler, if it hits a platform, is jumping. So this is looking kind of cool. And it stops, okay, so we can go up just like so. And it's not until our Doodler kind of falls here that the platforms will continue to rise. So this is looking kind of cool. Great. We have one more thing to do, and that is write one more function for when the Doodler is just moving straight. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to do it after both of these. So function move straight. And if he's going straight, we're just going to make sure that is going left is false, is going right is false. And we're going to clear interval left time ID and clear interval right time ID. And essentially else if, so when we press the key, so we arrow up, then we're going to move straight right. So it's going to clear all that and we can start fresh. Wonderful. So let's try that out. Okay, there we go. And you can see the start point is changing each time. That's because we are getting a new start point each time so that we can essentially jump from it. Okay, so there we go. Oops, we missed that one. But yeah, the start point is changing every time we hit a new platform. We are overriding that start point so we can start jumping fresh. This is looking wonderful. I'm really happy with this. So it turns out we actually didn't need the speed or the gravity. So I'm just going to clear that up. I'm happy with that. Okay, thank you so much for coding with me. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you can take this game, make your own, style it up. Please show me what you did with it because I would absolutely love to see.